Welcome to Washington Today for Monday, December 1st, 2025. I'm Gary Sterikoff. Thanks for joining us today. The White House has confirmed President Trump will meet with his national security team today to discuss Venezuela as his administration intensifies its pressure campaign on the country. The meeting comes as lawmakers from both parties voice concerns over reports of a possibly unlawful follow-up strike on an alleged drug vessel in the Caribbean that killed 2 survivors. We'll hear from the White House and members of Congress coming up. Congress returned today from its Thanksgiving holiday recess. The House is considering legislation banning those who were involved in the October 7th terror attacks on Israel from entering the U.S. The Senate is working on judicial nominations. Off the floor, talks continue on proposals to extend healthcare tax credits that expire at the end of the month. Majority Leader Thune has promised to hold a floor vote on healthcare legislation by mid-December as part of the deal to end the government shutdown. We'll hear from him and Democratic leaders Schumer and Jeffries coming up. Now, that attack happened on September 2nd, and on Friday, the Washington Post reported that it was Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth who gave the order to, quote, kill everybody on the suspected drug boat. It came after the first strike had killed 9 of the 11 people on board, according to the Post, and military officers saw 2 survivors, quote, clinging to the smoldering wreck. The Post went on to report that Special Operations Commander in charge complied with Secretary Hegseth's order, and the survivors were then, quote, blown apart in the water. Here's what White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt said about the report and the incident today to reporters.
Regarding Venezuela, the president said yesterday that Secretary Hegseth had denied that second strike, that reported second strike on an alleged drug boat on September 2nd, the secretary said to the president that didn't happen. But to clarify, I just wanted to clear this up. In his social media post, Secretary Hegseth didn't go into details about that strike. He just said U.S. operations in the area were lawful, and he said that the story and media reports were fabricated. So to be clear, does the administration deny that second strike happened, or did it happen and the administration denies that Secretary Hegseth gave the order?
The latter is true, Abe, and I have a statement to read for you here. President Trump and Secretary Hegseth have made it clear that presidentially designated narco-terrorist groups are subject to lethal targeting in accordance with the laws of war. With respect to the strikes in question on September 2nd, Secretary Hegseth authorized Admiral Bradley to conduct these kinetic strikes. Admiral Bradley worked well within his authority and the law, directing the engagement to ensure the boat was destroyed and the threat to the United States of America was eliminated. And I would just add one more point to remind the American public why these lethal strikes are taking place. Because this administration has designated these narco-terrorists as foreign terrorist organizations. The president has a right to take them out if they are threatening the United States of America and if they are bringing illegal narcotics that are killing our citizens at a record rate, which is what they are doing. And under the previous administration, there was enough fentanyl trafficked into our country to kill every American man, woman, and child many times over. And so that's why you've seen a drastic difference in this administration's policy with respect to the last, and it's one of the many reasons the American public reelected this president and support this Secretary of War in conducting these strikes.
So to be clear, to clarify, Admiral Bradley was the one who gave that order for a second strike.
And he was well within his authority to do so.
White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt in the Washington Post reporting today that the Pentagon's top general held a call with senior lawmakers over the weekend to discuss the legality of the lethal military strikes around Latin America. The Post reporting Joint Chiefs Chair General Dan Kane was on the call with Republican and Democratic leaders of the Senate and House Armed Services Committee, and that it included a conversation about the mission's, quote, intent and legality. And the general also expressed his, quote, trust and confidence in the experienced commanders at every echelon. Now, the committee chairs and ranking members, Senate Armed Services Chair Roger Wicker and Ranking Member Jack Reed, and House Armed Services Chair Mike Rogers and Adam Smith. None of those members are speaking about the call, but 2 members of the committees are. Here's House Armed Services Committee Republican Mike Turner of Ohio.
Congress does not have information that had occurred. Both the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Chairman of the House Armed Services Committee and ranking members have opened investigations. Obviously, if that occurred, that would be very serious, and I agree that would be an illegal act. That is not the legal opinion or the information or the legal justification, the acts that have been described to Congress that are being undertaken in this. There are very serious concerns in Congress about the attacks on the so-called drug boats down in the Caribbean and the Pacific, and the legal justification that's been provided. But this is completely outside of anything that has been discussed with Congress, and there is an ongoing investigation.
And Senate Armed Services Democrat Tim Kaine of Virginia.
This rises to the level of a war crime if it's true. And the questions that we've been asking for months are, give us the evidence that the folks on board were really narco traffickers. In one instance, there were 2 survivors, one Colombian, one Ecuadorian, in a different strike. Instead of arresting them and prosecuting them, the U.S. picked them up and returned them to their countries of origin where they were released. So if they were narco traffickers, why would we do that? We need more evidence about that. And we definitely need the administration to finally answer the question of why strike rather than interdict. If you know where the ships are, you can interdict. And when you do, you get evidence. You get individuals. You can squeeze them to give testimony against their higher ups. You get evidence with the drug seizures. And finally, the other question that my colleagues and I are deeply worried about is the entire legal rationale for these strikes. We had to pry with a crowbar after weeks and weeks out of the administration the supposed legal rationale for the strikes in international waters. It was very shoddy because it's classified. I can't tell you what's in it, but I can tell you it was not at all persuasive.
House Armed Services Committee Republican Mike Turner of Ohio and their Senate Armed Services Democrat Tim Kaine of Virginia, both speaking to Face the Nation yesterday. And this from Andrew Desidero of Punchbowl News, asked about Defense Secretary Hegseth's leadership of the Department of Defense. Senate Republican leader John Thune said, "I don't have at this point, I guess, an evaluation of the secretary. Others can make those evaluations." Andrew Desidero reporting that Senator Thune added, "What matters is whether the country is safer under President Trump's leadership," and that is the case. He spoke, of course, the House and Senate back to work this afternoon, as we said, following their Thanksgiving holiday. That reporting there from Punchbowl News of Andrew Desidero. And Senate Republican leader John Thune began his leader time remarks on the floor this afternoon, talking about holiday travel.
Mr. President, Thanksgiving is one of the busiest travel seasons of the year. More than 80 million Americans traveled for the holiday last week. And while most of them packed up the car and hit the road, about 6 million Americans boarded planes to spend the holiday with relatives and friends across the country. And I'm sure all of them were breathing a sigh of relief that the government shutdown was over and that air traffic control had resumed normal operations before their trips. Mr. President, the impact on air travel was one of the most visible aspects of the chaos that ensued during the Democrats' 43-day government shutdown. Flights were snarled throughout the shutdown, but it got progressively worse as the shutdown drug on. By the time Democrat shutdown entered its second month, the FAA was forced to order cutbacks in air traffic as a matter of safety. And more would have been required if we hadn't been able to finally reopen the government when we did. So, Mr. President, I'm relieved that air traffic was able to get back to normal levels before the holiday travel surge. And I'm grateful to thousands of air traffic controllers who were on duty during the shutdown without pay and who work hard every day to keep planes moving quickly and safely. They have an important job, and I know that every controller shares a commitment to putting safety first, whether it's a normal day, the middle of a snowstorm, or a government shutdown. Mr. President, even before the shutdown, our air traffic control system was facing challenges. And modernization efforts have been a priority for both the Trump administration and for Congress this year. Before the holiday, the Commerce Committee's Aviation Subcommittee held a hearing that examined air traffic operations during the shutdown, as well as the challenges that existed prior to the shutdown and that still exist today. And I appreciate Chairman Moran's attention to these important issues. And I'm grateful that my colleagues are taking the time to delve into the challenges facing air traffic control. At least our Republican colleagues, Mr. President, are taking the time. The lead Democrat on that panel called the hearing political theater. And the Democrats' witness for the Aviation Subcommittee talked only about, get this, Obamacare. That's right, Mr. President, Obamacare. A hearing to examine air traffic safety and air traffic control. And that was the only witness the Democrats asked to come and testify. So I'm hoping that this was a one-time political stint and not an indication of the attitude that Democrats are going to take going forward. Because we have a lot more work to do on this issue. Republicans remain focused on improving air travel and safety, and that hearing was just one part of our continued efforts.
Senate Republican leader John Thune speaking on the floor earlier today. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer also spoke, and on his mind, possible U.S. military action against Venezuela.
Donald Trump has turned the Caribbean into a dangerous tinderbox. Today, we have more troops off the coast of South America than we've had in decades. U.S. forces have struck at least 20 alleged drug boats with zero independent evidence, no transparency, and no concrete legal justification. And on Saturday, Donald Trump proclaimed that the airspace above and surrounding Venezuela to be closed in its entirety. What does this mean? We have no clue, because Donald Trump said a few hours later not to, quote, read anything into it. The erraticness of his foreign policy is dangerous in itself, saying one thing one day and one thing the next. And so, Americans are right to wonder, what on earth is Donald Trump planning in Venezuela? Is Donald Trump nudging America into another war? Is he seeking regime change for Maduro? Will he put U.S. troops in harm's way? Nobody knows. All we have is a bunch of contradictory statements from Trump. Donald Trump seems to be planning a war totally in secret, without congressional authorization, without any transparency, without any explanation for what his goals even are. And all it takes is one mistake, one miscalculation, one lapse in judgment from either side, and suddenly our troops could find themselves in an armed conflict with Venezuela. Lives could be lost. American security could suffer. So I want to be very, very clear. If Donald Trump proceeds with his plan to conduct strikes against Venezuela, Senators Kaine, Paul, and I will immediately file a war powers resolution to force congressional action to block the use of troops in Venezuela. The power to declare war lies in the hands of Congress, and we intend to exert that authority should the need arise. Now, I urge my Republican colleagues to work with us to advance this resolution if it becomes necessary, because the thought of another forever war makes Americans sick to their stomachs. Americans are tired of seeing troops bogged down in one country after the other. Americans do not want a pointless war in Venezuela. And Donald Trump does not have the authority to send our troops into harm's way without authorization from Congress. Should Donald Trump proceed, the Senate will immediately respond. Should a strike occur, we will force a debate in Congress and force a vote to prevent the U.S. troops to be in hostilities against Venezuela. Our troops' safety and our national security is at stake. I urge both sides to stand ready to assert the powers of Congress on matters of war and peace should the need arise, because the rules of the Congress allow us to require a vote on this issue should the need arise.
Part of Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer's leader time remarks earlier today, and there is one vote expected on the floor today whether to advance nomination of David Bragdon to be a U.S. District Judge for the Middle District of North Carolina. That is scheduled for 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And just one more note, several senators have been speaking on last week's attack on National Guard troops here in D.C., including West Virginia Republican Shelley Moore Capito. You can see all those statements at cspan.org and the C-SPAN Now mobile app. And as we mentioned, the House did come back to work today as well. Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries spoke to reporters. He was asked about the Washington Post report about Secretary Hegseth's involvement in the attack on the suspected drug boat.
The White House is lying, but that's no surprise because they lie for a living, and the American people know it. It's my understanding that Pete Hegseth, the so-called Secretary of Defense, was absolutely involved. I think he may have even recently acknowledged that because the facts are incapable of being disputed. And so the question in front of us, and I believe there will be bipartisan investigations in both the House and in the Senate in order to determine whether war crimes were committed and either U.S. law or international law or both were violated. It's already been crystal clear that Pete Hegseth is the most unqualified Secretary of Defense in American history. I called for him to be terminated months ago when the Signalgate scandal first broke out. Everybody on Capitol Hill knows he should have never been confirmed. It's a shame. It's because these Senate Republicans, just like House Republicans, are nothing more than puppets for Donald Trump's extreme policies. That's why they put Pete Hegseth into that position when they knew he was woefully unqualified. And now we have real evidence that extrajudicial killings are taking place. That's the stain on America's leadership in the free world, which is why our international standing is plummeting. And of course, the standing of the Republican Party is a complete and total disaster here in the United States of America.
And this from thehill.com, Leader Jeffries is pressing centrist Republicans to help Democrats extend Obamacare tax credits before they expire at the end of the month. Jeffries has offered a discharge petition to force a vote on a 3-year extension of those subsidies, even in the face of opposition from GOP leaders who control the House floor. That from thehill.com. This afternoon, Leader Jeffries was asked about the petition's support.
On the discharge petition, is it your expectation that all House Democrats will sign? As of today, I believe 212 of 213 have signed. Is it your expectation that all members of your caucus will sign it? And following up on the question about back channel conversations, is it your position that the fact that the subsidies expire in 30 days, the urgency that you say, the moment requires, is that enough for Republicans to sign on, or will it require some proactive conversations on the part of House Democrats to get them to break ranks with leadership and sign on to this effort?
Well, there certainly haven't been any leadership conversations because Mike Johnson has zero interest in protecting the health care of the American people, and he's repeatedly made that clear. Now, in terms of whether there are conversations member to member between the House Democratic Caucus and members of the House Republican Conference, there certainly have been some informal conversations led by folks like Tom Suozzi, who has floated a 2-year proposal with some modest reforms that we'd have to take a look at. But there's no indication that even that proposal has support from House Republican leadership. These people have zero interest in making life better for everyday Americans. And they repeatedly make that clear. They're in the face of the American people about it. Meanwhile, you got Donald Trump issuing reckless pardons, destroying half of the White House, bailing out Argentina, posting erratically on Thanksgiving. Like, this guy can't even give us a break on Thanksgiving when we're with our families. And the American people have had enough of it. These people have gone way too far. They've broken every single promise that they've had. And so I guess we can always hope that there are a handful of Republicans who will actually do what they said that they would do once their shutdown ended, which is to work with Democrats to find a path forward. But that path right now is an extension of the Affordable Care Act tax credits. I think our discharge petition in record time is now up to about 212, 213. It is my expectation that we will have complete and total unity amongst House Democrats.
House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries speaking to reporters at the Capitol. And here's Wall Street Journal reporter, White House reporter Natalie Andrews and Punchbowl News congressional reporter Max Cohen on the Republicans' position on health care.
Donald Trump is very interested in fixing the healthcare system when you talk to people on the White House side. And Republicans acknowledge universally that there are really big problems with the Affordable Care Act. So do some Democrats. And the problem is just Republicans have a hard time finding the government's role in fixing it. When you're a party that doesn't believe that the government should have a role in a lot of things, it's hard to extend that. It's hard to say, well, we should use taxpayer funds to enhance the Obamacare subsidies, which was a Democratic program. And so they are this tug of war in, do we use taxpayer funds to try to find an off-ramp? Do we try to pitch a different plan? And we know that they have talked about a lot of plans. Katie Britt has some plans circulating. Rick Scott has plans that Donald Trump mentioned that would maybe create some health savings accounts. But it's very confusing. How do you take these people off of subsidized plans, and then do you give them money and they use that money for the plan? It's not quite set in stone. And like Max said, they're supposed to vote rather soon, like next week. And these people want to know what's going on.
Max, do you think that vote stands next week, or by the second week of December, that the Senate takes a vote on health care?
Yeah, that's something John Thune promised Democrats as part of this negotiation. So I'm pretty confident that vote will happen. But I think there's increasing pessimism among both sides of the aisle that vote will result in anything substantive at all. We're already hearing from some Senate Democrats that they just plan to offer up what they have been demanding all along, which is a clean extension of these subsidies, which would give no policy concessions to Republicans, which would be dead on arrival in the House, and which could shift this whole discussion back to what many saw coming, which is just political talking points, right? Mm-hmm. Democrats saying, we tried to save your health care. Republicans blocked it. Republicans saying they're not trying to change anything. They're just pushing these crazy spending, et cetera. And we're nowhere. And this becomes just a 2026 campaign issue.
Punchbowl News congressional reporter Max Cohen and Wall Street Journal White House reporter Natalie Andrews on this morning's Washington Journal. Also today, this from White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. She released details on the MRI President Trump got last month.
As part of, and this is a summary from the president's physician, and we will release it right now. I think my team has it teed up for all of you. I'll read it for you, and then you'll get it physically as well. As part of President Trump's comprehensive executive physical, advanced imaging was performed because men in his age group benefit from a thorough evaluation of cardiovascular and abdominal health. The purpose of this imaging is preventative, to identify any issues early, confirm overall health, and ensure the president maintains long-term vitality and function. President Trump's cardiovascular imaging was perfectly normal. No evidence of arterial narrowing impairing blood flow or abnormalities in the heart or major vessels. The heart chambers are normal in size, the vessel walls appear smooth and healthy, and there are no signs of inflammation or clotting. Overall, his cardiovascular system shows excellent health. His abdominal imaging is also perfectly normal. All major organs appear very healthy and well perfused. Everything evaluated is functioning within normal limits with no acute or chronic concerns. In summary, this level of detailed assessment is standard for an executive physical at President Trump's age and confirms that he remains in excellent overall health. Again, we will provide that to you. I think that's quite a bit of detail, and in the effort of transparency, the president promised it last night, and we have delivered today. So there you go.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt to reporters this afternoon. The MRI was conducted at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. You're listening to Washington Today.
Giving Tuesday is coming, a global day to support the causes that matter most. I'm Paul from C-SPAN, and if open access to your government matters to you, you don't have to wait. Make your Giving Tuesday gift to C-SPAN today. We bring you live unfiltered coverage of Congress, the White House, and the Supreme Court, so you can access your government without spin or commentary. C-SPAN is nonprofit, commercial-free, and receives no government funding. We're powered by listeners like you. Make your Giving Tuesday gift now at cspan.org/donate. And thank you for supporting C-SPAN, your unfiltered view of government.
Welcome back to Washington Today. From Courthouse News, military veterans are defending Arizona Democratic Senator Mark Kelly after Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth called for an investigation into accusations of sedition and treason. Navy veteran and former military lawyer Tim Stringham told Courthouse News all this because someone said you can refuse unlawful orders. This is a waste of time in the way this entire administration is a waste of time. Courthouse News also quoting Army vet Signa Oliver, who told them she trained troops in the rules of engagement while stationed in Georgia. She said, quote, "In this teaching, I emphasized you are not to obey an unlawful order or you will be prosecuted as a criminal. But I guess if we have a criminal, I'm going to leave that one alone." That all from Courthouse News. Senator Kelly talked about the accusations and the investigation today here in Washington.
Donald Trump has had one and only one play: bullying his opponents into silence. He did it as a failed casino owner who bankrupted his properties and screwed over his contractors. He did it as a reality TV host known for firing people. And he's done it as president who tries every day to intimidate people with no regards for the rights or well-being of the American people. I'll say this for the guy: while he's never seemed to do much else right, for most of Donald Trump's career, bullying people has worked out for him. But not now. Because I won't let it happen. The American people won't let it happen. President Trump is trying to silence me, threatening to kill me for saying what is true. And he sent his Secretary of Defense after me. And it's not going to work.
And Senator Kelly was also asked about threats against him and his wife, former Arizona Democratic Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords.
Are you concerned about threats on your life? Have you stepped up your personal security and, of course, the security of your wife?
Hey, I'm no stranger. You know, Gabby and I are no stranger to political violence. We get a lot of threats already. She continues to get threats. She gets threats on her life, more so today because what Donald Trump said about me 10 days ago, that I should be hanged, that I should be executed. The threats on us have obviously gone up. I'm not going to get into details about my personal security. We take these threats very seriously, and I take, the threats from this president seriously. How many times in our country's history have you heard a president of the United States say that members of the Senate and the House should be hanged and executed? I mean, I can't think of one. Those words carry a lot of weight. The number of threatening calls that we get into our office have skyrocketed. And they were very graphic. I mean, some of them were put, not from my office, but another member put them out there for people to hear. The ones we get are worse than that. So I take this seriously. But again, that's why he does these things. Because he thinks he can shut me up. I have First Amendment rights. I'm a United States Senator. I am doing my job. I'm on the Armed Services and the Intelligence Committee. He ain't going to shut me up. I mean, he intimidates other people. I'm not intimidated by Donald Trump or Pete Hegseth or anybody else.
You can see all of Senator Kelly's news conference at cspan.org and the C-SPAN Now mobile app. From the Associated Press, Indiana House members pressed forward today with redrawing the state's congressional districts in Republicans' favor. Republicans who control the state house have said there's no doubt that redistricting will pass the chamber, but the fate of any proposal remains uncertain in the state Senate, where President Pro Tem Roderick Bey remains opposed to the plan. He told Politico last month, "It seems like the public is talking about this in terms of a binary choice. Either it's 7-2 or redistricting and get 9-0. That's not clear to me at all because we don't know who's going to run." According to IndyStar.com, the biggest changes in the proposed map come from splitting up the state's two Democratic-leaning districts currently held by Representatives Frank Mervan and Andre Carson. And from CQ Roll Call, Texas Republican Representative Troy Nehls has announced he will not run for a fourth term in Congress. The former sheriff made the announcement on social media on Saturday. Shortly after the announcement, his identical twin brother, Trevor, announced that he would run for the seat. Roll Call noting that this isn't the first time Trevor has tried to follow in Troy's footsteps. In 2020, Trevor Nehls ran for Fort Bend County Sheriff after his brother was elected to Congress. He lost that race to Eric Fagan. And the Texas Tribune reporting that Troy Nehls is the sixth Texas Republican to announce his retirement this year. And we're just one day away from the special election in Tennessee's 7th Congressional District. The latest survey done by Emerson College shows that 48% of voters surveyed support Republican Matt Van Epps. 46% support Democrat Afton Bain. President Trump won this district a year ago by 22 percentage points. And over the weekend, the president spoke at a rally where House Speaker Mike Johnson was appearing. And Speaker Johnson held his phone up to the microphone so that rally attendees could hear what the president said.
We have to win this seat. We've gotten you the largest tax cuts in history. And the new bill, the great big beautiful bill, kicks in, as you know, on January 1st. Hasn't even kicked in yet. And then you have no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime. If you borrow money to buy a car, you get a deduction that's never happened before. All these things kick in on January 1st. A lot of people don't know. They said, oh, they already kicked in. I said, no, it doesn't start until January 1st. So that was the first date. I just want to thank everybody. I love Tennessee, one of my all-time favorite places. And Tennessee, I guess, loves me because we've won by the biggest margins anybody's ever won by, so that's cool. But if you can go Matt Van Epps, he's a winner. He's going to be great. Don't let this stuff fool you. The Democrats are spending a fortune, and we don't want people that want to raise your taxes. You want to raise your taxes on top of everything else.
And meanwhile, on Sunday, Afton Bain talked to CNN about whether she would have voted for the continuing resolution that reopened the government last month.
I want to highlight an anecdote from the district that I think encapsulates how voters felt. I was at a healthcare town hall in Clarksville, and a Black female veteran who works at the Social Security office burst into tears. This was during, I think, the government shutdown had just ended, perhaps. And she, in her tears, said, why do I have to trade my pain for someone else's, alluding to the fact that, the Democrats, were holding out to ensure the ACA subsidies. So I want to flag that I think there's a lot more nuance in politics that we're not giving credit for. And I'm someone who always listens to my constituents. And more importantly, most people don't want to think about government. And the fact that they've had their government front and center for the past 9 months or 12 months speaks to the fact that they just want a government that works effectively for the people and to deliver lowering costs for them. And so I just, there's a lot of nuance, and I'm someone who always listens to my constituents, and I would have taken that into consideration in that vote.
Democratic candidate Afton Bain speaking to CNN yesterday. She's running against Matt Van Epps in Tennessee's 7th Congressional District. Matt Van Epps, the Republican, they're running to replace Mark Green, the Tennessee Republican, who stepped down earlier this year. And congratulations to New Jersey Democratic Senator Cory Booker, who got married over the weekend to Alexis Lewis. She is a vice president at a D.C. investment firm. The New York Times reporting the first I do happened last week at the U.S. District Court in Newark. That was followed by a family celebration at Ned's, which is a private club. Took place on Saturday. The club did not disclose it, but official photos indicate it was there, that Ned's overlooks the White House. And 70 years ago today, in Montgomery, Alabama, an act of civil disobedience in the civil rights movement. The Montgomery, Alabama Advertiser, writing today, Rosa Parks wasn't the first arrested for defying unjust segregation laws on a Montgomery bus, but when Parks refused a Montgomery bus driver's order to give up her seat on December 1st, 1955, she set in motion a chain of events that sparked a crucial new chapter of the civil rights movement for Black people and minorities who were oppressed in Alabama and beyond. And from 1995, here is Rosa Parks talking to C-SPAN about what happened 70 years ago today.
Take us back to the day that you were on the bus. What happened?
When I got on the bus and found a seat just back of where the white passengers were sitting, and along with a man who was next to the women, I was next to the aisle, and of course there were two women across this aisle. We went on a couple of stops, and the white passengers filled up the seats, and there was one white man standing, and that was when the driver insisted that the four of us stand up for this man to sit down. And of course there was no room in the back anyway to go any further back because people were standing up in the back already. And when the other three people reluctantly stood up and I didn't, is when he told me he'd have me arrested. And that's what he did.
Civil rights icon Rosa Parks speaking to C-SPAN in 1995. History.com writing that Rosa Parks' refusal was spontaneous, but not merely brought on by her tired feet, as is the popular legend. In fact, local civil rights leaders had been planning a challenge to Montgomery's racist bus laws for several months, and Parks had been privy to this discussion. Learning of the arrest, the NAACP and other African-American activists immediately called for a bus boycott to be held on Monday, December 5th. The first day of the boycott was a great success, and that night, the 26-year-old Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. told a large crowd gathered at a church, "The great glory of American democracy is the right to protest for right." That all from History.com on this day 70 years ago. You can see all of our interview with Rosa Parks and more on the Montgomery bus boycott at cspan.org. That's also where you can find this program as a podcast. It's also on the C-SPAN Now app and on YouTube. Just search Washington Today. And for more on the stories that are shaping Washington every day, get our daily email word for word. Just go to cspan.org/connect to subscribe. I'm Gary Sterkoff. Thanks a lot for listening today to Washington Today.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal, a live forum inviting you to discuss the latest issues in government, politics, and public policy from Washington, D.C. and across the country. Coming up Tuesday morning, we'll talk about Campaign 2026 and political news of the day with University of Virginia Center for Politics Director Larry Sabato. And then Elise Labott, global affairs journalist and Cosmopolitics Substack newsletter author, on U.S. foreign policy and current global affairs, including the latest on peace talks between Russia and Ukraine and U.S. tensions with Venezuela. C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Join the conversation live at 7 Eastern Tuesday morning on C-SPAN, C-SPAN Now, our free mobile app, or online at cspan.org.